Where is this going, by the way? I just need to know that. No, the story. Where am I actually?
YouTube, but I have a really small channel.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
Back when there was COVID going on, we used to be clapping for the nurses, and then there was this man across in the building across the way. Okay, hello. This is good content.
Yeah.
No, that's full, that's full. Take two. So, I went out for a walk. I went out to this park that's across the way from my building, and I was going out there to read. And this old man came down next to me. He was walking down by the bench, and he looked at me and he said, "Can I sit down next to you?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, whatever." And so he sat down next to me, and he was asking me where I was from and all this type of stuff. And he'd finish up, he had a book in his hand also, so he'd finish up every sentence by going, "Oh, this is a great book, this is a great book, this one." So I was like, okay, whatever. So I left your man anyway, and as I was going back up the elevator to my apartment building, I remembered that when we were clapping for the nurses, there's a building across the way from us, and there was an old guy, while the clapping was going on, used to have his shirt, and he was opening up his shirt like this. And I realised that was the same old man that came to me on the bench, so it was weird. He kind of knew us from flicking his shirt open across the way. It was very weird.
So I was skating down the canal in Ottawa, and it was in the middle of winter, and I was just skating, and then this guy came up to me, and he was like, "How are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm good." He's like, "Yeah, well," he's like, "I'm good too. Like, we're all dust man." And I was just like, "Okay," and then he just skated off. That's my most memorable encounter, because I was just like, "What is this guy talking about?"
All right. So, what has been your weirdest encounter with a stranger?
When Kevin Spacey almost ran me over in his Range Rover.
So I was on a night out in Hong Kong, and it was around 3 a.m. So things were kind of winding down, but not really. And there was a group of friends, and I was just not really paying attention to them. But what I noticed is one of the girls' tampon strings is hanging out of her cocktail dress. So I was like, oh, I should probably go tell her. And she was really nice and was like, oh, thank you for telling me. But then her friend was started getting instigating this fight that nobody wanted or nobody was even trying to have. And then they all of a sudden wanted to leave, and we were by the taxi queue. So they started getting into the taxi, and we were like, okay, we were gonna start ignoring them and leave. But then we noticed that they were having issues communicating with the taxi driver, and and so we were like, oh, where you want to go? And they were saying Shuzhen Hill in English, but the taxi driver speaks Cantonese, so we were trying to explain it in Cantonese. And all of a sudden they were just leave us alone, leave us alone, get out of here. And we were like, they don't know where you're gonna, he doesn't know where you're going. So we were trying to help them and trying to put their limbs in the taxi. But they couldn't even get in the taxi, and they started getting more and more aggressive at us, even though they couldn't even close the door at this point. And after a while, we just shoved them in and just closed the door and told the taxi driver to go. And we're like, okay, that was so weird, but whatever.
Right. So again, I was walking around here actually, around Kids Beach at 1 a.m. with my friends. We were just coming back from the beach, and then some guy just emerged from the shadows of this tree, and he started telling us that he'd downed a bottle of wine and had a joint or two. We're like, okay, kind of unprompted. And then he went on to explain how he was not a homeless person. And I was like, okay, we didn't think that. We didn't really ask. Okay. He just kept telling us about his life, and he seemed like he could sense that we were a bit frazzled by the whole situation. He said, oh, don't worry, I'm just walking my dog. And then all of a sudden, this gigantic dog just comes out of nowhere, and we just start petting him. I was like, okay, I guess you were just walking your dog.
All right, go for it.
Oh, you're not gonna, no?
What is the weirdest encounter you've ever had with a stranger?
Okay. So it's the first time I met this girl right here. It was at Drag Beach, we were making music with this guy who was hiding himself. And she just approached us, you know, and she was like, "Yo, I like your music that you're making. It's good. It's beautiful." And she started telling us about all these other, you know, places that play live music. And you know, afterwards I'm like, "Okay, you know what? Give us your number, you know, because we want to find out about these places so we can call you and you can direct us, you know, on where we should go, how to get there, you know." And yeah, she gave me a number. This girl, but it was the wrong number. It was a wrong
No!
number. Yeah. She gave me a wrong number, you know. And
On purpose?
on purpose. On purpose. She thought I was hitting on her. She really thought I was hitting on her at the time, but it was all about the music. But you know what happened? I mean, as fate will have it, we saw her again at Rag Beach. Oh, and guess what? We ended up in a band together. We're now in a band together. You know, so it's funny, you know, that like she initially kind of didn't want me to have a number, but the next thing we're now in a band together. We sing some good songs.
Go ahead.
Probably my weirdest encounter with a stranger was one time I was driving to my house and I was about to park at my house and I saw this guy and he's holding his longboard and he's talking to a guy in the middle of the road, and I parked my car and the car drives away and he starts wandering up the street, but he left his gym bag laying in the middle of the road. So I follow him up the road. I'm like, "Hey buddy, like, isn't this your bag? Isn't this your bag?" And he turns around, he was like, he had like fallen and hit his head or something. So I brought him back to my house and I sit him on the porch. I'm like, "What's your name?" Like, "What's your name?" "I don't know." I'm like, "What date is it?" He says the date. Fine. I'm like, he's got a longboard and a gym bag. It's the middle of winter. There's snow on the ground. I was like, "Are you longboarding?" He's like, "I think I fell on the SkyTrain and hit my head." I'm like, "Are you sure?" I was like, "Is your house near here?" He's like, "No, but I really need a glass of water." So we like gave him a glass of water, and then he just like was on our porch, like barely conscious, and then like we called an ambulance, and an ambulance came, picked him up, and I never saw this guy again. I never heard what actually happened to him, if he was okay or not. But it was he was just like wandering up the street, just like, and he wasn't drunk or anything, he was just like concussed. And then the paramedic's like, "Are you diabetic?" He's like, "Maybe." And she's like, "What's your name?" And then they took him away and I never saw him again.
Go ahead.
Weird story. So we were at my parents' home, just there for a long weekend, and when we were downstairs for breakfast, right? And the entire family was there, except for my dad, and we were all waiting for him to come down. We hear some shuffling upstairs, and all of a sudden, looking at the stairs, comes down this one guy in underwear. Nobody recognized him, followed by my dad with this stern look on his face.
Sometimes I think about myself. I wish I was somewhere else, far from my fear, anxiety, far from my weakness. I could be gone, but I'm just afraid.